They'll never admit it out loud, but the moment they betrayed you, they set their own downfall in motion. And now, every time they see you, they're reminded of everything they threw away. Not because you want them to feel shame, but because you became someone they can never touch again. The most devastating revenge? It's not exposing them. It's not even punishing them. It's becoming so untouchable that they can't even recognize the person they once thought they controlled. They thought they broke you. They thought walking away made them win. But what they never saw coming was that you would rise so far, so silently, that they'd spend the rest of their life looking up at someone they can never reach again. Welcome to StoicCraft, where ancient wisdom meets modern battles. Here, we don't chase revenge. We craft unshakable inner strength. Because in the end, silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. Let's begin. They believed that betraying you would shatter you, that walking away would leave you broken and defeated. They even smiled when they turned their back, convinced they'd made the final move. But what they didn't realize was that the moment they lost access to you, they also lost your protection. Their mask slipped, their illusion shattered, and life, in its quiet but relentless way, began keeping score. You didn't scream, you didn't chase, you simply disappeared and rebuilt everything they thought they had destroyed. Now, you've become the version of yourself they swore you could never be. Unshakable, untouchable, and far beyond their reach. So today, let's talk about what really happens when someone betrays a good person and how life ends up teaching them a lesson far more devastating than revenge ever could. We'll see it through the lens of Stoic wisdom, emotional intelligence, and the quiet kind of power that doesn't need to shout. The truth is, people who betray you rarely look back. They walk away assuming they've won, that you're left behind, shattered and ashamed. What they can't see is the storm they've just awakened. Not a storm of rage or chaos, but a silent one, the kind that grows inside you slowly and steadily until it becomes unshakable strength. Betrayal doesn't just hurt, it rewires something deep within you. The sharpest cut almost always comes from the ones you let closest. Strangers can't wound you the way someone you trusted can, and that's what makes betrayal so soul-crushing. It's not just about what they did, but about what they made you question. Your sense of love, your belief in loyalty, your own worth, even your ability to judge character. In those quiet moments, you ask yourself, how did I not see it coming? Was I blind? Did I deserve this? But here's the truth, you weren't naive. You were genuine. You didn't fail, they did. They failed to honor the space you gave them. They failed to meet the level of loyalty you offered without hesitation. The Stoics have a saying, pain is the first teacher. Marcus Aurelius wrote, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. In other words, betrayal doesn't define you. How you process it does. You can let it break you, or you can let it build you, deeper, wiser, quieter, sharper. That's exactly what the Stoics did. They didn't seek revenge. They didn't need closure. They used the pain as raw material to carve out a new version of themselves, one that could never be touched in the same way again. Maybe this sounds familiar. You gave everything to someone, your time, your honesty, your energy. Then one day they vanished, or worse, they turned on you. They told a story where you were the villain, and suddenly, people you thought were your friends went silent. Number. Explanation. No chance to tell your side. Just cold, calculated distance. You sat there, surrounded not just by the ashes of the relationship, but by the ashes of the illusions you once held. That love always protects. That loyalty is always mutual. That good people don't get hurt. But what they didn't expect was you. They thought you'd beg. They thought you'd chase. They thought you'd drown in sadness and spiral into weakness. Instead, you rose in silence. You went ghost, not out of bitterness, but clarity. Not out of anger, but self-respect. You turned pain into fuel. You turned silence into strength. And you came back not to them, but to yourself. The Stoics teach that the highest virtue is not brute strength, it's self-mastery. When someone betrays you, the greatest power you can hold is restraint. You didn't lash out. You didn't post angry rants. You sat with your pain, let it burn, and allowed it to transform you. And here's the twist, this pain was necessary. If they hadn't betrayed you, you might still be bending over backwards, still explaining yourself, still shrinking, so they could feel bigger, still pouring your energy into someone who was silently draining you. Their betrayal was a blade, but it didn't just cut, it severed the cord that was choking your growth dot. So don't regret the pain. Don't wish it away. Honor it. Because that pain was the beginning of your rebirth. Let's be clear, their betrayal was not your fault. It wasn't because you were too much. It wasn't because you weren't enough. It was because they couldn't handle the light you brought into the room. People don't always betray you because you failed them. They often betray you because you stopped being easy to control. Betrayal isn't always born out of hate. It's often born out of fear. Fear of your growth. Fear of your higher standards. Fear of your stability. Some people are addicted to chaos. They thrive on drama, manipulation, and codependency. And when they realize you're thinking for yourself, speaking for yourself, and setting boundaries, they panic. You become unfamiliar to them. You become a mirror showing them all the parts of themselves they aren't ready to face. Instead of confronting those truths, they run, they sabotage, they betray. Remember this, someone else's disloyalty is not a reflection of your worth, it's a reflection of their character. You may have been kind, generous, supportive. You may have shown up, stayed loyal, and given second chances. But they still walked away or worse, stabbed you in the back dot. It's tempting to internalize that and think, maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I care too much. But no, you cared correctly. They just didn't have the capacity to value it. You were real in a world that rewards the fake. You were steady in a world addicted to chaos. And that terrified someone whose life was built on instability. They pulled away from you not because you belittled them, but because your growth made them feel as if they were being left behind. It wasn't that you made them feel small. It was that they refused to grow alongside you. And so one day they disappeared without a word, or they whispered behind your back, painting you as someone who had changed for the worse. The truth? They betrayed you because you became someone they could no longer control. From a Stoic perspective, the lesson is clear. Don't take it personally, but do take it seriously. Epictetus once said, when someone acts badly, it is because they have judged it to be right. In other words, people often betray not out of pure cruelty, but because they've convinced themselves it's justified. Maybe they thought, they're too good for me now. I'll hurt them before they outgrow me. Or I'm tired of feeling compared to their progress. These thoughts aren't grounded in reason. They're fueled by ego. And you're left reeling, not just from what they did, but from why they did it. Yet over time, you start to see it for what it was, a strange kind of protection. Betrayal can be a divine filter, removing those who would only poison the table they sat at. Their departure wasn't the end of your story. It was simply an edit. Sometimes life subtracts people for your protection, not your punishment. Detach from the why. You may never get a confession. You may never hear them say, I was wrong. And that's okay, because as Stoicism teaches, you don't need their apology to heal. You just need your decision to stop bleeding for people who cut you without remorse. The next time you question your worth because of betrayal, remember, they didn't betray you because you were weak. They betrayed you because you were becoming stronger. There's a point in every healing journey where you realize you don't need to argue, explain, or seek closure. You simply go silent. And that silence, it's not weakness. It's not avoidance. It's power. When you stop engaging with the chaos, you stop feeding it. For people who crave control, your silence is the ultimate threat. They thrive on your reactions, your emotional outbursts, your need to defend yourself. It gives them a false sense of importance. But when you go quiet, they lose their grip. They can't twist words that were never spoken. They can't manipulate a mind that refuses to play their game. You become a mirror they can't bear to face. Without your energy to distract them, they're left with nothing but themselves, no one to blame, no one to provoke, no one to project onto, and some people would rather destroy a mirror than look into it. You've probably been here before. A text filled with accusations, a phone call baiting you to defend yourself, or a sudden message from someone who remembers your worth. Right after you stop responding, for a moment you're tempted to reply, to craft the perfect comeback. But instead you put the phone down, you breathe. You let the silence speak for you. That's growth. That's self-mastery. And trust me, they feel it. Epictetus also said, "It is not things that disturb us, but our interpretation of their significance." Your peace is not threatened by what someone says. It's threatened when you choose to internalize it. When you respond, you give weight to their words. When you remain silent, you strip them of their power. The Stoics were never passive. They were intentional. They didn't react to everything. They responded only when it aligned with virtue, logic, and self-control. Silence isn't avoidance, it's a boundary. And some people simply no longer deserve access to your voice. Not because you're punishing them, but because you're protecting yourself. Your silence says, I no longer seek validation from those who devalue me. I refuse to fight battles not worth winning. I choose my energy over your chaos. That's not cold, that's clarity. And here's what usually happens when you go silent with a manipulative person. First, they mock you. Oh, so you're ignoring me now? Then they poke. Guess you don't have the courage to face this. Then comes the guilt trip. After everything I did for you. And finally, they panic because they realize they've lost more than your attention. They've lost the power they once held over you. The game ends not with revenge, not with drama, but with a decision. You are no longer participating in the pain they created. Going silent doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means you felt too much, and you've decided your peace is more important than proving your point. So before you reply, before you post, before you let your emotions take the wheel, ask yourself, will this restore my peace or restart the cycle? If it doesn't align with your healing, your values, and your emotional intelligence, let it go. Sometimes the strongest thing you can say is nothing at all. They thought they got away with it. The lies, the betrayal, the manipulation. They walked away like nothing happened, as if your pain was collateral damage, as if your silence meant surrender. But what they forgot is that life always keeps receipts. Karma doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It moves quietly, but surgically. You might not witness it directly, but you'll sense it, in the way their mask starts to slip, in the way people they manipulated begin to doubt them, in the way they slowly start living in the mess they themselves created. The Stoics didn't see karma as magic, but as cause and effect. Every action plants a seed, and what grows depends on what was planted. Seneca said, every guilty person is his own hangman, meaning no one escapes the weight of their own conscience. When someone lives dishonestly, eventually their lies become their reality. When they betray the loyal, they create a world where no one trusts them. And when they treat hearts like toys, they end up emotionally bankrupt, surrounded by mirrors they can't bear to face. You'll know karma has arrived when they begin to implode, not because you cursed them, but because they became the architect of their own collapse. The collapse doesn't happen in an explosion. It unravels quietly, but the signs are always there. Their relationships start to crumble, not from bad luck, but from bad character. Jobs come and go. Friendships fade. And in every ending, they point the finger outward, never inward. Their own reputation starts to haunt them, stripping away the mask they once wore so well. And when the truth finally catches up to them, when everyone else begins to see what you saw years ago, they try to come back. You'll notice the cracks. You'll sense the collapse. Not because you wished them harm, but because they became the architect of their own downfall. Real story, the narcissist who thought he'd won. There was a man who spent years emotionally manipulating his partner, gaslighting, triangulation, even cruelty wrapped in humor. She finally left, went silent, built a life of peace. He laughed at first. She'll come back. She always does. But this time she didn't. He replaced her quickly, parading a new relationship online to show the world he had upgraded. But behind closed doors, it fell apart. Because he hadn't just lost a woman, he lost a mirror that once made him feel powerful. Every failed attempt to replace her only confirmed what he'd been avoiding. It wasn't her who was broken, it was him. Years later, he reached out with a message, half apology, half manipulation. But by then, her silence wasn't a temporary reaction. It was a permanent boundary. That's the day karma arrived. Not as fire, not as drama, but as her joy, her growth, her peace. Karma doesn't require your watchful eye. It requires your letting go. Waiting for them to fall isn't stoicism, it's ego. True emotional intelligence means you trust the process. You focus on what you can control, your discipline, your boundaries, your self-worth. The Stoic shift from victim to victor, When they betrayed you, they thought they broke you. But Stoic wisdom flips the script. You didn't lose, you gained mental clarity, emotional resilience, spiritual strength, and the freedom to rebuild without their chaos. Their karma is simple. They have to watch you thrive in a space where their manipulation has no oxygen. Your peace becomes the loudest form of justice. Here's what the Stoics would say. Your peace is your proof. Your silence is your statement. Your elevation is your answer. You don't have to prove they were wrong. You only have to prove you were always strong. The moment you stop hoping they suffer is the moment you truly win, because nothing unsettles a manipulator more than realizing they no longer have the power to unsettle you. You owe them nothing, no reaction, no petty posts, no whispered warnings to mutual friends. And in that nothing lies the most devastating truth of all. They no longer matter. Stoic philosophy, indifference is power, not passivity. To the untrained eye, indifference looks like weakness. But to the Stoic, it is supreme strength. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Indifference is not apathy, it's clarity. It's the refusal to be emotionally hijacked by people who live for chaos. You see their games. You recognize their manipulation, and you choose not to play. That's not weakness. That's evolution. The cost of getting even. Let's be honest. Revenge is tempting. You imagine the moment they feel the sting of your pain. You think about the perfect words, the cold justice, the satisfaction. But what does it actually give you? A momentary high, a quick hit to your ego. And then you're back in the mud with them. The price of revenge is your peace. And that's always too expensive. Real story. The woman who said nothing. She discovered her partner had been cheating not once, but several times. Her world collapsed overnight. Instead of exploding, she quietly packed her things and left. No public drama. No revenge. No gossip. 6 months later, she had a new job, a healthier body, a peaceful home, and was deep into therapy. Meanwhile, her ex struggled to explain why he lost a good one. Her silence had done more damage than 1,000 angry texts ever could. Why indifference wounds deeper than anger. What truly drives toxic people mad is not your rage. It's your absence. They realize you no longer care who they're with. You don't check their stories. You don't replay what if in your mind. You don't hate them. You simply feel nothing. To someone who once thrived on your emotions. That's not just rejection, it's erasure. And that's the one thing they can't recover from survival to self-mastery. You used to react because you were hurt, confused, desperate for answers. But now you need none of that. No apology, no explanation, no validation. You've moved from survival mode to self-mastery. Your energy is no longer invested in proving they were wrong. It's invested in becoming everything you were meant to be. Your growth becomes the answer they will never forget. So if you're tempted to get even, pause and ask yourself, will this heal me or feed my ego? If it restores your peace, do it quietly. If it's only to trigger them or win the breakup, walk away. Sometimes the best revenge isn't success, it's not caring whether they see it at all. The ultimate Stoic principle: control the inner, release the outer. The Stoics divided life into two categories: what you can control, your choices, your thoughts, your mindset; what you cannot control, their perception of you, their words, their actions. Revenge belongs to the second category. It gives them emotional access again. Indifference belongs to the first. No one can take it from you. And once you truly own it, you become untouchable. Indifference is the fortress. You build for yourself untouchable and unshakable, because it belongs entirely to you. It's yours alone, and no one can take it unless you hand them the key. When you master that, you stop being at the mercy of anyone's chaos. Your peace becomes non-negotiable. Let them talk. Let them post. Let them act like they've won. Because when the dust settles and your name no longer passes their lips, you'll still be here building, healing, becoming, while they're still trying to provoke a reaction from someone who's already moved far beyond the battlefield. That's Stoic freedom. That's emotional intelligence. That's your new power dot. And here's something else. They always come back. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day when the silence grows too loud, when their new supply runs dry, when the mask slips and the emptiness inside them becomes unbearable, they'll reach for the last place they felt in control. You dot. It might start with a casual message, a mist like on an old photo, or some calculated way to remind you they still exist. But here's the difference now. You've changed. You no longer feel hate, fear, or even anger. You feel nothing. Why narcissists always circle back? Let's be brutally clear, narcissists don't miss you. They miss access to you. They miss the emotional reaction, the validation, the control. You were once a mirror for their illusion, and your silence shattered that reflection dot. So when they return, it's not love pulling them back, it's leverage. They're not here to reconnect. They're here to regain control. The power of non-reactivity. In the past, you might have felt triggered. Questions would spiral. What do they want now? Should I respond? Maybe they've changed. But when you've done the inner work, when your self-worth and boundaries are firmly rebuilt, you don't need closure. You are the closure. Your silence becomes a full sentence. Your peace becomes the gatekeeper. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed." You're no longer the version of yourself they once manipulated. You've upgraded. You've healed. And now their old games can't touch you. When they try to circle back, it's not your job to explain, defend, or reopen old wounds. It's your job to stand firm and say, this door is no longer yours to knock on. Real story, the silent exit that became strength. Sarah spent 4 years in a toxic relationship, gaslighting, blame shifting, constant guilt trips. When she discovered infidelity, she walked away. 6 months of no contact, new habits, a new life, a new mindset. Then came the text. "Hey, just thinking of you. Hope you're okay." The old Sarah would have cried, felt confused, maybe even replied, but the new Sarah? She smiled, deleted the message, and moved on. Not from bitterness, but from clarity. Why they panic when you don't respond. Here's a truth narcissists will never say aloud. They expect you to break no contact. They expect the pain to pull you back in. They expect guilt to make you explain. They expect the emotional leash to still work. But when you don't flinch, when your silence stays solid, they panic. not because they lost you, but because they lost their power over you. You're no longer the person who tolerated, explained, and forgave too quickly. That version is gone. You now value your inner peace over their external validation. Understand this. Not every sorry deserves a response. Protect your energy, as if it's sacred because it is. Silence, at this point, isn't a tactic. It's a lifestyle. You don't need to punish them. You don't even need to remember them. They will live with the memory of losing you. You will live with the peace of never needing them again. Letting go isn't weakness, it's mastery. You don't need to hate them, win the argument, or warn the next person. You simply move forward calm, focused, unshaken. That's how you win, not by proving anything to them, but by building a life too high for them to reach. And while you're rising, they're quietly unraveling. Small failures, fractured relationships, a reputation that begins to rot from the inside out. They told everyone you were the problem, but now they can't keep anything stable because the storm was never you. The storm was everything they were hiding. What goes around starts within. You don't need mystical karma for this truth to work. There's something called psychological karma, a natural cause and effect. When someone betrays what is good, loyal, and true, they create disconnection inside themselves. At first, it's invisible, but over time, it appears in the loss of trust from others, the inability to sustain real relationships, the constant gnaw of a restless conscience, and the quiet erosion of reputation. They try to bury their wrongdoings under charm, distraction, or silence, but life has a way of collecting unpaid debts, not always with thunder, sometimes with a slow, suffocating unraveling. Seneca said, "Every guilty person is his own hangman." The Stoics knew this. People who harm others don't escape, they simply delay the collapse. People who do harm aren't escaping anything, they're only delaying the inevitable collapse. They carry it with them like an invisible weight. They might think it's hidden, but guilt, shame, and fear are corrosive forces. They eat away at peace from the inside out. So while you're out in the world, healing, building, and transforming, they're stuck in the very maze they created. Real story. The hidden collapse. David cheated on his partner multiple times. He gaslit her, chipped away at her confidence, and then walked away, pretending he was free. At first, it looked like he had won. New girlfriend, new job, new lifestyle. But 3 years later, the truth started to show. The girlfriend left, citing his emotional unavailability. His work performance tanked. Old friends began to quietly avoid him because of his reputation. There was no public scandal, no viral takedown, just the slow, undeniable unraveling of a man who thought he could outrun his own character. Meanwhile, the woman he betrayed had completely rebuilt herself. She had grown into someone even she barely recognized in the best possible way. And here's the kicker. She had no idea what David was going through. She didn't care. By the time life handled him, she was already free. Why you didn't need to interfere. Emotional intelligence teaches us this truth. You don't have to punish people who hurt you. Life already has that handled, and the more detached you become, the more obvious it becomes who the real problem was all along. People start to notice the cracks. They start asking the questions you never had to answer. And all the while, you remain still growing while the chaos chases them down. signs of their unraveling, even if you never see it online. Passive-aggressive, posts about fake people, constant reinvention, new jobs, new friends, new stories, oversharing, or complete silence, loneliness disguised as, "I'm just focusing on myself," a deep, unexplainable emptiness because they traded something real for their ego. And life doesn't reward that. Your peace was the real payback. The opposite of revenge isn't forgiveness, it's peace. Peace speaks loudly. It echoes when people see you calm, grounded, successful, without drama, without fighting to clear your name. It forces them to face a brutal truth. They didn't need me to win. And that, my friend, is a pain. They weren't ready for the pain of irrelevance. They watch someone they thought they broke become someone they can no longer touch. The universe isn't blind, it's patient. The goal was never to expose them. The goal was to rise so high that they expose themselves. Your power didn't come from beating them. It came from not letting them change who you are. That's the ultimate reversal. They betrayed you, but you became stronger. They thought you'd fall apart, but it's their life that's falling apart instead. And now you're free. They are haunted. And you never lifted a finger. They might have mocked you when you stayed quiet, dismissed you when you were kind, taken you for granted when you were generous. But one thing they could never take was your dignity. How dignity is lost and found again. Let's be honest, during the chaos of betrayal, you may have done things you're not proud of. Begging for clarity, explaining yourself too much, taking the blame that was never yours, crying over someone unworthy of your tears. It happens. It doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. The transformation happens when you finally walk away, when you choose peace over drama, when you enforce boundaries, ignore messages, and consistently choose yourself. That's when you begin to collect your dignity back, piece by piece. Dignity is the currency of emotional intelligence. It allows you to walk away without setting fire to everything behind you, to let them talk without needing to respond, to be misunderstood and remain unmoved, to stay silent when proving your point would cost you your peace. Silence isn't revenge, it's protection. You no longer need to be seen as right. You just need to be at peace. The Stoics understood this deeply. Self-control is strength. Right thought is mastery. Calmness is power. And dignity? That's the vessel that holds all three. The unshakable self after the storm. When you come out the other side of betrayal, there's a version of you that emerges quietly, more grounded, more focused, less reactive. People notice the shift. You no longer engage in gossip. You don't answer every provocation. You've become harder to reach, not out of bitterness, but out of discernment. You stop defending your choices because you finally understand. You don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing peace. You stop performing for approval. You stop over-explaining to be understood. You start living from a place of deep self-trust. That's what makes you unforgettable, not the volume of your reaction, but the grace of your rebuild. Real moment, the dignified exit. Elijah worked in a toxic environment, gaslighting, exclusion from key decisions, constant undermining. He tried to speak up, tried to be a team player, tried to earn fairness, and one day he realized the truth. He wasn't being treated poorly because he lacked value. He was being treated poorly because others were threatened by his integrity. So he did the most powerful thing he could, No drama, no grand announcement. Just a resignation letter and a quiet walk out the door. 6 months later, the department collapsed, key clients gone, turnover at a high. And Elijah, thriving in a new role, surrounded by people who valued his presence. More importantly, he valued himself again. Why they can regret, but never re-enter. At some point, the people who betrayed you will realize they didn't just lose your time or attention. They lost your essence. They'll remember how you listened without judgment, how you gave without keeping score, how you stayed loyal even when they didn't deserve it. And they'll realize that version of you is gone forever. You didn't turn cold, you became clear. You didn't harden, you raised your standards. Even if they apologize, even if they beg, they don't get that version of you back, because the one they betrayed no longer exists. What they can never take, yes, they may have taken your time. They may have wasted your love. They may have disrespected your trust, but they never took your soul. They never took your growth. They never took your ability to rise, rebuild, and outgrow the fire. And that's what they regret most, not that you left, but that they can never return. The silent turning point in every betrayal story. There's a moment when the tables turn silently. No confrontation, no receipts, no public rants, just your absence, your peace, your rise dot, and then it hits them. They didn't just walk away, they became someone I can never reach again. Your existence becomes a mirror reflecting back to them everything they lost, wasted, and failed to value. You didn't teach them the lesson life did. You didn't lecture. You didn't gloat. You didn't send closure texts or moral sermons. You let the silence speak. You let your elevation be the message. That's the beauty of emotional intelligence. You don't answer wounds from the same place they were created. You rise. You let your new reality make the noise. And that reality, no drama, no access, no entry into your peace. That stings far more than any revenge ever could. Your growth becomes their reflection. The person they once called too sensitive now has boundaries they can't cross. The person they dismissed now walks with quiet confidence and clear purpose. The person they tried to break is now surrounded by respect, alignment, and inner strength. And they can only watch from the sidelines they built for themselves. Because when you outgrow those who betrayed you, you don't need to punish them. Your very existence becomes the punishment. Real example. She was the lesson Sarah's ex belittled her goals, mocked her dreams, treated her as replaceable. When she left, he assumed she'd return like always. This time she didn't. From afar, he watched her build her business, improve her health, and heal her spirit. Years later, she didn't hate him. She didn't need to. She wasn't the same woman anymore. He once thought she was weak. Now he couldn't even look her in the eye. Not because she threatened him, but because her presence forced him to face everything he threw away. You don't need closure when you have clarity. Closure isn't something they give, it's something you give yourself. It comes when you stop needing them to understand, when you stop craving validation, when your peace becomes more important than being right. Because when your life improves in silence, they feel every step you take forward, even if they never hear your footsteps again. Their guilt becomes their sentence. They might laugh in public, but they grieve in private, not necessarily over you, but over what they became. When someone betrays a good soul, They don't just lose a relationship. They lose the version of themselves that once had access to real love. You were the chapter they closed too early, the opportunity they misread, the blessing they mishandled. Now you're gone, not because you hated them, but because you finally loved yourself more. What they feel now isn't jealousy. It isn't even anger. It's shame. When you become the reminder every time they see someone with even a hint of your kindness, they flinch. Every attempt to recreate what you gave so effortlessly fails, because you weren't just a phase. You were a mirror, a test, a standard they weren't ready to meet. And now your very existence reminds them of all the pieces of themselves they still haven't fixed. You've become the reminder they can't mute. Your silence is the loudest sound in their life, the truth they'll never say out loud. I thought I'd moved on, but they're still living in my head, and I'm not even in theirs. You didn't win by being louder. You didn't win by being cruel. You won by being unbothered, by letting go, by healing harder than they ever hurt you. Now you're not just the one who got away. You're the one they'll never get over. Life doesn't reward betrayal. They thought walking away from you would elevate them. They thought discarding you like an afterthought would boost their status. But life doesn't reward betrayal. Life responds to energy. And energy doesn't lie. People can post their best life all they want, but time always reveals the truth. Betrayal isn't just a moral mistake, it's a spiritual fracture. You can't violate trust, manipulate someone's heart, and walk away clean, even if no one sees it, even if no one calls it out. Life remembers, and the bill always comes due. You don't chase justice, you become it. As you rise, as you build a life of peace, purpose, and power, your transformation is the justice, the discipline you develop, the boundaries you protect, the self-worth you reclaim, the empire you build in silence. All of it becomes a mirror that shows them not just what they lost, but who they never had the courage to become. True Stoic justice, the philosophy, doesn't preach revenge. It doesn't glorify petty victories. It teaches order, character, and the long game. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." You don't react. You don't retaliate. You rise, because true power is self-mastery. And when they see you glowing in silence, rising without noise, and immune to their chaos, that's a loss they'll never recover from. True story. When karma doesn't look like punishment, Elena was engaged for 6 years. He cheated, lied, and ghosted her. No closure, no explanation. For months, she waited for the universe to punish him. Nothing happened. Then one day, she stopped looking. She stopped waiting. She started focusing on herself, got back in shape, launched a non-profit, and found love again, not from someone else, but from her own soul. Years later, she bumped into him. He had aged, looked tired, was stuck in a dead-end job. He smiled. "I always knew you'd be successful." She simply nodded and walked away. That was karma. Not because he suffered, but because she had risen so far, he no longer recognized the woman he once destroyed. The ultimate loss: irrelevance. No audience equals no identity. No control equals no power. No reaction equals no relevance. Once you become irrelevant to a manipulator, their world shrinks. They don't live on peace, they live on chaos. They feed on your triggers, your confusion, your reactivity. Take that away, and they vanish. Not physically, but emotionally and spiritually. You closed the door without saying a word. You didn't announce your growth. You didn't perform your healing. You simply became unreachable emotionally, energetically, philosophically. And as they scroll through your life in silence, they realize something devastating. You became untouchable. Not because they couldn't reach you, but because you no longer look back. Your rise is not spite, it's self-respect. Your growth wasn't fueled by hatred. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about finally seeing yourself as enough and building a life from that clarity. You don't rise to punish others. You rise because you refuse to stay small just to be loved. And that is divine justice. Final thought. One day, they might say, I should have treated them better. But by then, you'll be too far gone, immersed in peace, anchored in purpose, thriving in your new life. Their words won't echo. You won't need closure, revenge, or justice, because you are all three. You didn't chase revenge. You chose peace. You didn't collapse. You became a storm in silence. And now, they remember you not for your presence, but for the absence that echoes louder than any words you could ever say. You are no longer the broken one. You are the warning. You are the proof. So if someone has betrayed, used, or discarded you, let this be your turning point. Don't seek revenge. Don't fight to prove yourself. Become the person they never imagined you could be. Untouchable, unbothered, unapologetically whole. Because nothing ruins a betrayer's life more than seeing you thrive without them and knowing they will never again be part of the story they thought they controlled. What was your strongest move in making sure a toxic person never returned to your life? Was it a boundary you held? A moment of silence that said everything? A mindset shift that turned pain into power? Share it below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to reclaim their strength today. If this spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to StoicCraft, where silence becomes strength and healing becomes legendary.